Let's call this meeting to order. Roll call, did you do that, Holly, or did you
Do that. Ken Anderson. Here. Brian Van Gorp. Here. Larry Hafner.
do that? Here.
Dana Chomi.
Here.
And Ken Visker. Here.
All right, everybody have a copy of the agenda?
Yep.
All right, does anybody have any corrections? Somebody gonna make a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
I'll second it.
Have a motion to made and seconded to accept the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
Hi,
Ken and,
Ken and Dana.
hey, we got two Kens on the.
Oh, I'm sorry. KV,
Was the agenda, I missed that because of this phone.
Ken Visker made the motion, Dana second.
All in favor say aye.
Hi.
All opposed, same sign. We have the minutes in front of us. Does anybody have any corrections or additions? Excuse me.
I'll move to approve them. Well, we just did that.
No,
This
now
is
we're on the
Minutes.
minutes.
This is minutes.
Second.
Previous minute. We have a motion, first made and seconded to approve the minutes as presented. All in favor say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Approve minutes, guidelines. I don't know that we need the guidelines, do we?
It doesn't look like we're.
Hearing, all right. Aaron, you want to tell us what the first one up? First one up is, who is it, Foss?
Correct, yeah. Please take notice that an application was received from David Foss seeking a variance of 15 feet to meet the required 50-foot setback from the southwest property line for an existing garage and shed. A hearing on this application will be held at the Houston County Commissioners Room, Caledonia, Minnesota, on Thursday, May 24th, and this was advertised on May 9th. The board has seen situations like this before where a property split places a new property line closer than a building than is allowable. In this case, this was discovered, as often is the case, when the applicant inquired about a permit for his shed. The shed had already been started, but it hadn't been completed, as I understand it. The original house was built in 2001. It was built on the parent parcel, and then in 2013 they split 4 acres, including the house, and the garage that's referenced here is an attached garage off of that parent parcel, and that's what put the line closer than is allowable. The site itself is a fairly steep site. This is on the north side of the river valley. So it is just kind of a flat spot carved out of what is otherwise a steeper bank. As I said, the site is just under 4 acres, but the slopes upon which the structures sit are 5% or under. Because the site is smaller, there's limited options for the placement of structures, due not only to the slopes but also to the septic system and things of that nature that are taking up space. I think that's all I would add. If there's no questions for me from the board.
Is the shed completed?
It's not completed.
How complete is it? I mean, it looks like it has a roof on it.
It
huh?
does. It has sides and a roof. No door, no siding.
3 sides are completed. The
Yeah, 3
front
sides.
part
The
where
front
you
is
would
not.
have a garage door is not completed at all.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to recess the Board of Adjustment meeting and open public hearing to consider the application.
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made and seconded to recess the Board of Adjustment meeting and open the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same
Second.
sign. Do any of the members wish to recuse themselves at this time because of a conflict of interest in this request? Hearing none, we'll move on. Okay, Aaron, you want to present the staff report?
Yeah, I guess I covered most of it there a little prematurely. The one thing that I left out was that in talking with the applicant, the siting of the shed was due to an assumption that the house was properly sited off or set back off the property line. And so it replicated what existed. Unfortunately, the house was not properly set back, but that's why we have two variances of the same distance here. I would ask Mr. Foss if you have anything to add to, I guess, the details I provided.
Well, we did talk to the owner of the lot that we received this house from, Dwayne Von Arx. We made him aware of this information and the variance and how it wasn't set back when we split off the parcel. And my wife typed up
I drafted up a letter to Mr. Von Arx, and would you like me to read it? It's short. As you know, per our conversation, after attempting to obtain a building permit for our shed, it was revealed that the shed and the garage attached to the house on our property at 5055 County 9, Houston, Minnesota, are less than the allowable 50 feet from your property line. Both structures are 37 feet from the property line. We are writing this letter to obtain your written signature stating that you have no opposition to both structures to remain as they are, 37 feet from the existing property line. We appreciate your consent on the issue and hope to be granted a variance at a Houston Township variance hearing scheduled for May 24th, which you are welcome to attend. Thank you. And then we spoke with Mr. Von Arx, and he said he didn't see any reason to come to the meeting, but he did sign the paper for us, just stating that he wasn't opposed to it.
And he's the owner of the property?
He's the owner of the property that split the
But-
property and
yeah.
sold the 4 acres to us. Yes.
Okay.
And the house was in existence when you bought it?
It was, and the garage as well.
Is there a reason they put the property line there?
Well, when we first looked at this house, he had set a specific price on it. We tried to lower that price right when we bought the house, and as soon as we did that, he instructed us that he was going to add some extra land onto the lot, or onto that parcel. So to basically butter up the deal and not have us lower the price of what he was selling.
Anyway, yes, so when we bought it, it existed as it does now, the split. And we, I guess, naively at that time did not check the property line and.
Well, he actually went, I don't know if to the zoning people right before we were selling or closing the deal, the signing, and I think we actually had to wait a few days because they were zoning or splitting that parcel up, and I'm not sure what actually happened with that.
Yeah, we're kind of unsure about the splitting that he did, but yeah, but it was, yes, as we purchased it, it is now. And then, obviously, that wasn't revealed until we went to get the permit for the shed. I think the reason he split it like that is because at the back of the house, like Aaron said, there's a steep embankment that goes down to, and then he has an existing old house down there and has built another shed down below. So I think that he wanted to split it on that steep hillside so that he would have the
As
flat,
much.
the flat area down below to do with as he pleased. So.
He's the, excuse me, he's the only one who would be impacted by it. I mean,
Right.
there's no other,
Right.
do you have anything more you'd like to add? Right now?
I don't think so unless you have any further questions of us.
I'm going to open it then to comments by the general public here. Does anybody wish to comment on this or have any input for this? Hearing none, we'll move on. You don't have to have any comments on that. Guess we'll go back to the regular, or the meeting, right? I would entertain a motion to conclude the public hearing and reconvene the Board of Adjustment meeting.
So move.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded to reconvene or conclude the public hearing and reconvene the Board of Adjustment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. This seems like a funny place for this. For the record, have any of the members visited the site?
No.
Yes, I did.
Do you have any comments or input you'd like to share?
Not probably that's gonna change anybody's mind about anything. It did strike me that the site for this shed is not a very good site because it's that deep gully right behind there, and it looks like you had to kind of shore up some gravel there to support the back of the shed. Otherwise, no, I don't have anything to say.
Well, I guess if there's no further discussion, we'll go through the findings.
Before we do that, in terms of how we want to approach the findings, this was advertised as a one variance for the two structures. It's my opinion the board would have the leeway if they wanted to change that now. You would not have to handle them together because they're so similar. I made an assumption that you, for the sake of time, may want to handle them together.
There's more than one variance being applied.
Well, there's a variance from the new shed, and there's a variance from the old garage. But
Well,
it's the same distance.
Like I said before, I don't know that the outcome would be different. I mean, they're the same distance away. I guess if somebody wants to go through them twice, we can do that, I suppose, but I think the origination of them is different, but I don't foresee any change in the outcome of either one of them from one to the other. Maybe somebody does.
I'm comfortable handling them together.
I guess I would like to see them handled separately for the reason that the garage violation is entirely caused by the split of the property, which was none of this party's doing, whereas the shed that is currently being built is being constructed by them, and the violation is now being created by them. And in fact, I think if they had applied for a building permit before they started building, they would become aware of the 50-foot setback. So I think this situation is significantly different.
I agree, except they'd probably be still here for a 15-foot variance, whether they knew about it or not. I mean, whether they had prior knowledge, I think they'd still be sitting here asking for that variance.
But we could then vote differently on those two decisions, is
Right.
my point.
I guess for the sake of time, and Larry, as you mentioned, outcomes, maybe you ought to just take a vote on how you want to handle this, so we're not just going through it for no reason.
Sure.
So if, you already kind of know where you're going to land on this, and there's not going to be a different outcome for the two, I don't see a utility in us. We're going to go through these findings plenty of times tonight to come. I would suggest that, I
Yeah,
guess, to the
all
chair.
right. Let's take a vote on whether or not we're gonna combine them or handle them separately. Ken?
Oh, I'm comfortable handling them together.
Dana?
Well, I'll handle the one, too.
Larry, one,
I'd say separate.
and the other Ken?
I would say combined.
That's what, 4-1. We'll combine them.
Okay, then, so when we go through the required findings, we would be looking for the reasons. If you have differing reasons for the different structures, be sure to specify, but if the reason you're offering in support or against the finding applies to them both equally, there would be no need to do that. Finding number 1, that the variance request is in harmony with the intent and purpose of official controls. The staff analysis on this finding is that the official controls are intended to provide for orderly development and provide for the protection of public health, safety, and welfare, and the proposal is compatible with protection of public health, safety, and welfare. I'm going to ask each of you to vote yes or no, and you don't have to provide a reason, but at least somebody on the board has to provide a reason for the yes or no that carries. I'll start with you, Ken.
I concur with what the staff analysis. I'd say yes.
Larry?
Yes, and I agree with the staff analysis.
Dana?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Number 2. There are practical difficulties in complying with the official controls, and the proposed use of the property is reasonable. Economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. Staff analysis on this is that the existing buildings are already located. If the shed is located between the house and the hillside, it could impede the view of the hillside and the garden to the north. It also minimizes roadway onto the property. The underdeveloped parts of the parcel also have steeper slopes and contain the septic system. In order to grant this, the board must find that the views, slopes, and potential cost constitute practical difficulties. I'll start with you, Ken. Visker.
Yes.
Brian.
I concur with the findings as far as the garage is concerned. I do not as far as the storage shed is concerned. I think there are alternatives for that.
So am I correct to assume that that's a no overall?
Yes, I guess since we're handling them together.
Dana.
Yes.
Larry.
Yes.
And Ken Anderson.
Yes.
And I need a reason in the affirmative from one of you yes votes.
I agree with the staff analysis.
Okay. Number 3, the variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property and not created by the property owner. The staff analysis is that the area east of the home contains the septic. The abundance of steep slopes on the site is atypical. The current location of the shed provides for ease of use as it houses similar items as the garage and allows for better flow of property. In order to grant this, the board must find that this or other unique attributes constitute special circumstances. Let's start with Brian.
I will say that I vote yes on the garage and no on the shed, again for the same reasons. The special conditions of pre-existing conditions exist for the garage but not the shed, and since we're handling them together, I have to say no, I guess.
Dana.
Yes.
Larry.
Yes.
Ken Anderson.
Yes, and I basically concur with the staff analysis.
And Ken Visker.
Yes.
Number 4, the variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than a variance, and the minimum variance which would alleviate the practical difficulty is sought. Analysis is that the shed is existing. The petitioner built the shed to match the setback of the home based on his assumption that the setback for the home was applied correctly from the property line during the split. The Board of Adjustment must find that it is unreasonable to require the garage and/or shed to be removed or relocated. Dana.
Yes.
Brian.
No, for the same reasons. I see them as two separate issues there.
Ken Visker.
Yes.
Ken Anderson.
Yes.
Larry.
Yes, I guess one of the things I look at for variances, I don't feel anybody has or will be disadvantaged or hurt by this being that much closer to that property line. It's not gonna affect anybody really, other than the homeowner. It's gonna have a positive effect for them.
I just want to add a little bit to this one. In terms of alternative sites on that parcel, anyone have comments that there are not to support your yes vote?
Yeah, I didn't go look at it personally. Are there alternative sites?
It's a very small parcel, and much of it is
It
very
looks
steep.
like not.
slope behind it?
There is a slope behind it. In terms of the reasonableness of moving the shed, does anybody believe that's reasonable or unreasonable? Or moving the shed or the garage, I suppose?
At this point, it's not reasonable to move it. Like I said, if it was impacting somebody real negatively, it would probably be more, be more logical to do it, but it's not impacting anybody.
Number 5, the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality nor substantially impair property values, public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity. Staff analysis is that sheds are commonly found in this neighborhood. A shed is not anticipated to substantially affect neighboring property values. No impact is anticipated on public health, safety, or welfare. Ken Anderson.
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Ken Visker.
Yeah. Yes.
Ken, since you're last year, no one's given me a reason thus far. Do you want to?
I have to look at this again for a second. I sort of got lost. This is number
Five.
5. Well, I mean, obviously, if there are other sheds in the vicinity, these kinds of buildings typically enhance value as opposed to minimize value. So I don't see it as a problem.
Thank you. Number 6, the request is not a use variance and shall not have the effect of allowing any use that is not allowed in the zoning district, permit a lower degree of flood protection than the regulatory flood protection elevation, or permit standards lower than those required by state law. The buildings are not located in a floodplain, and garages and accessory buildings are permitted uses in the ag district. Brian?
Yes.
Ken Visker?
Yes.
Ken Anderson?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes, for the reasons stated. It's, like I said, it's not in the floodplain. There's nothing to prevent it.
Dana?
Yes.
Okay. That completes the findings. It looks as though yep, positive finding on each finding.
is staff is staff proposing any conditions for the board's considerations?
None are proposed.
Unless there are any other questions, I will entertain a motion to either adopt the findings as stated. Staff can read the finding if necessary. This is not adopting, this is not granting the variance, this is just adopting the findings, accepting them.
So move.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded, approving the findings as presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. I would entertain a motion to approve or deny the request. Motion must specify what is being approved, denied, including any special conditions.
So I would offer some language there if somebody wanted to make a motion to approve. It would be to grant a variance of 15 feet to meet the required 50-foot setback from the southwest property line for an existing garage and shed.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the request. All in favor say aye.
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 Disapprove, same sign.
Aye.
Motion has carried. Your request has been approved.
Thank you.
What you said, send something out to him.
Yeah, I'll be in touch with you and we will complete the zoning application for your building permit. You will be assessed an after the fact
Yeah.
penalty on that permit.
That's it.
You're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We gotta wait till 6 o'clock.
Yeah. We got a
That's-
couple
We gotta
minutes.
go legal.
Yeah. We got what, a couple minutes? That was timed pretty good.
Timing is everything.
It is, ain't it?
Got some additional info here in this, so grab it and pass it down. I may have suggested to Mr. Johnson that it would be unlikely we'd be starting on time.
Is he scheduled next?
No.
Yes.
Maybe it's, is that 6?
No.
Oh, is he-
No,
is he-
Halls are next.
Oh,
Halls
okay,
are
never
next.
mind, never
Halls
mind.
are-
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're here.
Yeah, they're here. That's the last.
What do they do with the agenda?
We'll get the staff in line.
Being 6 o'clock, we will hold our next meeting. Where are we at? Hearings. Aaron, you're gonna read the specific information?
Please take notice that an application was received From the following persons for a variance of setback requirements, the applicants are James and Catherine Hall of Spring Grove Township, and they are seeking 2 variances, the first being a 40-foot variance to meet the required 50-foot setback from the east property line to build a pole shed, and the second being a variance of 45 feet to meet the required 50-foot setback from the east property line for an existing shed. A hearing on this application will be held at the Houston County Commissioners Room, Caledonia, Minnesota, on Thursday, May 24th, and this was advertised on May 9th.
Okay.
I will save the staff report until we actually arrive at the appropriate time for it this time.
Okay, that's where, okay. I'll entertain a motion to recess the Board of Adjustment meeting and open a public hearing to consider the application.
So moved.
Seconded.
We have a motion and seconded to recess the Board of Adjustment meeting and open a public hearing. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Does any member wish to recuse themselves at this time for a conflict of interest concerning this request? Hearing none, we'll move on. Aaron, you want to present the staff report?
Yeah. There's several things involved in this, like applications you've had before. This is a parcel that is substantially consisting of steeper slopes. There's 3 flatter areas. One is fully inaccessible due to the nature of the parcel, and that is the result of a split that occurred, which took the historically tilled land and separated it from the wooded land. The application here is on the wooded land. That split occurred prior to the ownership of the applicants, and they purchased immediately after it was split. Your staff reports show the parent parcel on there, and now the new existing parcel, and they also have some topographic lines that will show you or give you an indication of the slopes present. For the purposes of the existing shed is not an after-the-fact permit, and that no permit is required for that type of shed. However, they are required to meet property line setbacks. So we would, in this case, should the variance be granted, there wouldn't be an after-the-fact permit required. It would simply be your permit your shed that's not subject to permitting can stay in its present location. The parcel's 43 acres in total. There's one alternative location analyzed in the staff report. That's not meant to be all-inclusive of any possible alternative. So there could be something beyond that was just done based on the similarity of slopes at the proposed location and the alternative location that was presented there. The 2 major impediments to the use of the alternative application that is presented in here are drainage that the driveway would need to go through, and then secondly, the fact that it would require disrupting or destroying a portion of some pasture that has been restored in native prairie. The applicant has indicated that he would not like to do that. I think I will leave it there and ask if there's any questions for me from the board.
Aaron, the possible alternate site, is that the applicant's alternate site or your recommendation?
It's not a recommendation. It's just
Who developed the possible?
It's just another possible location, and now the applicant didn't put that out there. I think the prairie makes that not an option for him based on my interactions with him. He very much doesn't want to place something on the prairie. The reason I presented that is that when we go through the findings, you're going to have to talk a lot about alternative locations. And that site was selected because it's really the only other, I mean, not that precise location, but in the vicinity of where that alternate is really the only other, what I would call practical alternative, and just in terms of the slopes of the ground and the accessibility off the road.
Okay.
Are there any more questions for Aaron? Does the applicant have any additional comments, anything you'd like to add?
Turn this on?
No, it's not on. No, it isn't.
There you go.
Yeah, first, I just appreciate that everyone was able to do the site visit yesterday. Much easier than me trying to sell this through pictures, so I do appreciate that. As mentioned, you know, we did put a stewardship program in place with the DNR about 10 years ago. You know, we did the cost share for those fields to get those in prairie grass. We also worked with Gary at NRCS, you know, to do some invasive species removal from the woods. We've worked with Dave in water and soil to work a runoff pond so it's not coming down through our land into Riceford Creek. So just the point being, you know, we think we're good stewards of our land. We try to do the right thing. That's one of the reasons too we do not want to, you know, besides having to go through a runoff, destroy that field as well. So I don't think beyond that we did talk in here a little bit as well about, you know, we obviously love the site. We love the area. Spring Grove's one of the nicest little towns we've ever seen. So we do plan to eventually build there and then hopefully retire there some years. So that's plays into this as well in our minds, at least for where the location of the shed can be kind of as a secondary. And the only option then, you know, in order to still be able to build a house is to put that shed where we're requesting. So I don't think I have anything else.
For a workable location for the home
So.
and whatnot, and just using the local businesses for what we've done at the property also, so.
Yeah, and just talking with, you know, we're using California Lumber and Tony basically, he's also said it's really the only practical area to try to build on that slope would cause problems. So,
Where do you live now?
right now we're living in Rochester.
Also, it's quite a commute.
Yes.
If you talk about in the stewardship program, is that in CRP or anything like that?
Nothing formal like that, no. The
I mean,
size was
you're
more-
not compensated for it being out of production.
Yes, we were compensated in the sense putting it back into natural prairie grass. I think it was a 50-50 cost share for that particular.
When you were doing it, but it's not an ongoing.
Oh, no, not
Okay.
an ongoing program.
Okay,
It was just for the project.
Yes.
good. Anybody else have questions for the Halls? With that, we'll open it up to the public comment period. Anybody has an interest in this or would like to support or otherwise is welcome to come forward, be heard.
I'll say here that we did receive comments from two neighbors, both in support of the variance, and both to the east, the property line from which the variance is sought.
Do you have the names of those?
Yes, Jay Solom.
Jay Solom,
He
okay.
phoned to offer support, and then Gordon Espelin
Okay.
also phoned in with support.
Hearing none, we'll move on. Does the applicant have any additional comments he'd like to? Well, we probably don't respond to any comments made because there weren't any, but. So, assume nothing's come to you.
No additional comments.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to conclude the public hearing and reconvene the Board of Adjustment meeting.
We didn't really vote to end it.
Yeah, we did.
I was trying to see where the
existing shed is on these? I can't see where it is. Can you point it out for me?
I think we're,
I think it's
yeah,
on
we
that.
just wanted to close that, didn't we?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to conclude the public hearing and reconvene the Board of Adjustment meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion been made in second to conclude the public hearing and reconvene the Board of Adjustment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion has been made and seconded to close the public hearing and reconvene the Board of Adjustment. Oh, we went through that already.
Kind of hard to keep track. I did this last time.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
You were here.
yeah.
This
For the
time.
record, have any members visited this site?
Yes.
Yeah, we all have.
Yeah, I think that's in a funny place.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I very much
Sounds
appreciated the opportunity to visit with the applicant.
Yes, that was good to.
It was good to see.
Yeah, that was really helpful. If there's no further discussion, we'll go through the findings.
Is there a preference on which request we do first?
We're doing them separate, okay?
Actually, I think we're going to try to, we'll go through the finding and we'll have the requirement and we'll touch on both. So,
As we're going through the requirement.
Okay. yeah.
correct. So I'm only going to read the requirement once and I'll say
Okay.
pole barn and then I'll
New
say
shed
now
or-
for
or
the shed.
existing.
Okay, all right, that sounds like a plan.
Okay, so number one, that the variance request is in harmony with the intent and purpose of official controls. The analysis on this is that the proposed location is not on ground that has historically been tilled and is supported by the policy of preserving prime agricultural land for future agricultural production. Slopes at the proposed location are acceptable, meaning under 24% for development, and the preservation of the prairie is supported by the goals of protecting natural resources that protect and enhance land resources. For the pole barn, Ken Anderson.
Yes.
Larry?
Yes,
Dana?
Yes, I agree with the staff analysis.
Brian?
Yes.
Ken Visker?
Yes.
For the existing shed, Dana?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Ken Visker?
Yes.
Ken Anderson?
Yes, and agree with the staff analysis.
And Larry?
yes, and I agree with the staff analysis as well.
Number two, there are practical difficulties in complying with the official controls, and the proposed use of the property is reasonable. Economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. The analysis is that the board must conclude that an access road crossing a drainage and/or the disturbance of the reclaimed prairie in conjunction with any economic considerations constitute a practical difficulty.
What about an alternative site there, just, and I don't know the directions here very well, but it would be, I guess, just to the west of the designated site that they want to build on is also a reasonable alternative to build on for the shed.
Well, that would be, I mean, I think that's part of the analysis you're doing. I think that maybe would come more into play in number 4, where we're talking about, only a variance, and it's the minimum variance.
I read somewhere of it that they couldn't build to the west because they were going to put a house up there. If you're talking west.
Well, if you have a walkout basement, you could go further west.
Well, here we're looking, I guess, at reasons why this is kind of a, it touches on what you're getting at, Brian, and that it's reasons, what are the practical difficulties at this site? So, you know, really what I'm trying to say here in the analysis is that, and what I don't say here that I probably ought to have is that most of the parcel is too steep for development. Of the areas that are left for development, the alternative location that's presented in the staff report, which is not supposed to exhaust alternatives, but that's the one that I'm focusing on here, would require that driveway to cross that drainage, and that the prairie to be taken up.
I would find a difficulty with a driveway across that drainage and wrecking the prairie. I think that particular alternative for me is not acceptable. There may be some additional maneuvering on this side, but not the prairie.
I guess I would also advise on this one that this finding does not require you to exhaust all other possible locations. All you're finding here is that there are some practical difficulties at this site, and the proposed use is reasonable. And I didn't say which structure we're talking about. The pole barn will always be first, and if I don't say that, please remind me. But the pole barn, and I can't remember who I started with.
Yes.
Brian, you. Why don't you go ahead, Brian?
On the pole barn,
On the pole barn.
I would say no. I think there are alternative sites.
Well, here we're not looking at alternatives, we're looking at practical difficulties, but, so,
Well, those two things that kind of go
They are.
together
Yeah,
in this
okay.
case, right?
Yeah.
Ken Visker,
Yes.
Ken Anderson,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes, I think, and maybe I'm getting into another one here, but I think that's probably best use of that piece of property. If you stop and think about it, they could put it over there in that the one they restored, then this would sit idle and be,
when you say
Have
best
little
use,
use.
and we have, in our finding, we have reasonable, are you tying reasonableness and best use?
sure.
Or am I putting words in your mouth?
Well, I just think that if they were gonna put the house, the pole building, and whether we can acknowledge it or not, the eventual house over in the other spot, then what happens to this? It just becomes, has little value, but it's there.
Okay. Dana?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the same standard for the existing shed. Ken Anderson,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes, for the same reason.
Dana,
Yes.
Brian,
No, for the same reason.
Ken Visker.
Yes.
Finding number 3, and this would be for the pole barn. The variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property and not created by the property owner. Larry?
Yes, I agree with the staff
Oh,
analysis.
actually, I didn't do the stuff, sorry.
I was just reading it though.
Analysis on this is that while there are other instances occurring in the county, a 40-plus acre parcel in the ag district with the degree of natural limitations to development found in this parcel is not typical. However, prior to the split in 2007, the parcel was not limited in the way that it now is. So the BOA must find that the applicants did not create the conditions caused by the split.
When was the split made again?
2007.
Okay, yeah.
And we are on the pole barn, and Larry, you said yes, and you're saying staff analysis.
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Ken Visker?
Yes.
And Ken Anderson.
Yes.
Now the same question, but this time applied to the existing shed. Ken Anderson?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes, same reason.
Dana?
Yes.
Brian?
No, that shed was definitely created by the property owner.
And but when you say that shed, you're saying the need for the variance. Is it, am I-
Right.
yeah, okay. Ken Visker?
Yes.
Number 4. The variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than a variance, and the minimum variance which would alleviate the practical difficulty is sought. The analysis regarding this is that the board must find that the obstacles presented by the drainage, the loss of the prairie, and additional costs render the alternative locations presented in the analysis unreasonable, and that no other reasonable alternatives exist. And we are focused on the pole barn first. Dana?
Yes.
Brian?
No other alternatives exist.
Ken Visker?
No, and here's my, can I make a comment? You know, from my perspective, here's our dilemma. You know, we're tasked with enforcing zoning laws, but the mere fact that we have a Board of Adjustment tells me that the board put us here to take care of exceptions and other conditions. And so that's the conflict that I have, is I want to enforce those setback rules, but at the same time, I don't want to be harsh in a way that where there aren't there isn't any harm to a neighbor, or there isn't any harm to the environment or the site or that sort of thing. And so I'm conflicted about this, but I think that there's a way to move that shed maybe 25 feet off the lot line and move it south that wouldn't harm your future plans, and would put us more in line with what the intent of our zoning laws are, which is a 50-foot setback. So that's sort of my, I wanted to tell you why I'm not supporting your 10-foot minimum. You're taking the very best way that you could do that, but I'm not convinced that the very minimum is the only way to do it. So that's my rationale.
Ken Anderson?
I guess I'll vote yes. I feel that with the slopes that there are and grading around the structure to make it in sync with the slopes, that variance is necessary.
Larry?
Yes, I view we looked at the alternate site, which has significant downside to it, and it seemed to be that it had a little more room, but basically you run into the same issue where it drops off in the end. So I mean, the benefit doesn't justify the additional benefit doesn't justify the cost. Plus, there's really nobody that'll be disadvantaged from this that I can see in the foreseeable future.
Dana, we started with you on that one, correct?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. So same requirement, the variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than a variance, and the minimum which would alleviate the practical difficulty is sought, and this time applied to the existing shed. Brian?
No.
Ken Viskert?
No.
Ken Anderson?
I guess I'll go with yes, but I really never studied whether there were reasonable alternatives for that other shed.
Larry?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes, yes.
I need a reason from one of you yeses. Well, I mean, not studying it, we need something.
Yeah, you need something better than what I gave. I
Yes,
know
yeah,
that.
yeah. What am I offering in here? Yeah, I'm really not offering you too much in terms of reasons. Larry, can I put you on the spot?
Explain that reason, the reasons again.
The reason here is we need, the existing shed needs to be granted the variance requested because there's no other reasonable method of making it complying with the ordinance. Meaning, there's no other place you could place that, and the minimum variance that is needed is what's being sought.
Well, I struggle with needed, but like I said, on the other side, there's nobody who's going to be disadvantaged by it. I don't know how you put that in there. I guess if that was me, I'd be asking for it to go in the same spot because it's not hurting anybody by being there.
Can I comment on
That
that?
makes sense?
Yeah.
I think no one's hurt by it under the current situation, but we do not know that someone else won't want to build a house there in the future. And I think one of the primary functions of zoning is to be long-term stewards of the resources of the county. And the next time the land use plan is written, for example, the quarter idea may disappear. Or 100 years from now, it will likely disappear. So at some point, someone will be likely impacted. And I think we have to take a long-range view here. And if a site can't be built on within the confines of the ordinance, then it shouldn't be built on. And I say that with empathy. I'm very glad you're doing the thing with the prairie, and I think that you can build out there within the confines of the variance. I think if you just move the whole thing to the east a little bit, it would work, and it's not the ideal slope, I realize that, but if you design a certain kind of house with certain dimensions, it could certainly work. So I'm not trying to be a hard nose here, but I think at the same time, we have a responsibility to the future of land use here.
Am I allowed to speak?
Sure.
Yeah.
We're specifically talking right now the shed.
Right.
The house
Yeah.
is much easier with the walkout basement to the east,
And that's the plan.
and that's the plan right now. With the shed, to try to put that, without a variance, that would create, it wouldn't be practical in most people's minds, I don't believe, with that slope and a 6-foot buildup. So I don't see even taking a the house out of the equation. I think the shed at 50 feet is not practical. Plus, then when you try to put a house to the east of it, then you start running out of real estate. I mean, to the west of it, my fault. Then you start running out of real estate. So I don't want to get too confused in the house versus the shed here, but
Right, we're just talking about the shed today, but
I have 3 yeses on that, and I have one statement that the current location doesn't disadvantage anyone. I have statements from you as well, Ryan. I need to have one for the vote that carries at
Right.
least, so that's why I'm focused on that.
Well, and I think too, yeah, it someday very well could somebody want to build there. But in the foreseeable future, I don't, I mean, that's quite a ways out. And you could build a case to say anybody could build any place, really.
The bigger problem you run into, anyone building on that other property has to have at least that 50-foot setback from the property line also,
Yeah,
or else get a variance.
And this,
And as you're dealing with existing structures, you also have to deal with whatever it is to an existing building. So you're dealing with whoever comes to that other property now has to deal with what's there. But the property line is the first thing, and they have that 50-foot setback, no matter what they want to do.
unless we give them a variance.
Right.
in the way I understand it today, if we were to build the ordinance today, no one else could build on that section anyway, correct?
quarter section, yeah. So
no one else could build a residence.
Correct.
They could
Right,
build a
and
building.
in the past, there
Right.
feels right next.
Yeah.
next
Okay,
door.
that I wasn't aware of that.
Yes.
Yeah, well, they can build a building, but not a residence.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's the one house per quarter, that could change tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Do we have the discretion to say, that would people feel better if we would reduce the, well, put it this way, it's, when we get 75% variance and greater is problematic for me. And this falls in that, would it be reasonable to, or can we suggest, what, we're looking at 10 feet?
this is a 5 foot off the line.
5 for the shed, 10 for the
Pole barn.
pole barn.
What they're building.
So could they go 10 or 20?
I inquired with the county attorney on this exact question, and it's his opinion that if the findings that the board makes support a lesser degree of variance, that you're within your powers to do that. So I guess the short answer to your question is yes.
Yeah, and, well, I didn't figure it out. Like I said, just a general rule, I get a little uncomfortable when it gets more than 75% variance. And, what was it, 150? I don't know what that'd be, but it would be more reasonable. I'd be interested in other people's opinion of that.
Just a point of order, we have 3 yeses on the table and 2 noes. Are we looking at yeses changing their votes? Otherwise, I think we can move on.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Good point.
Yep.
If you feel you have the,
Yep, I've got something there. So that,
Good point. Dodge the bullet.
number 5, the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality nor substantially impair property values or the public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity. And the analysis here is that there's no impact to public health, safety, or welfare anticipated. We looked at estimated setbacks within a half-mile radius. There's 34 buildings found there. That's an approximate. 91% of those meet the 50-foot setback. There are other accessory buildings nearby that do not. There's one located 15 feet from a property line to the east, another to the southeast, 11 feet from a property line. And there's one 14 feet from a property line, also to the east. All the other buildings in that radius satisfy the requirement. If we, and this, there's an error in the report here, if you chose to grant the variances for these two buildings, we would go down to an 86% compliance approximately as well. That analysis is all based on beacon sites and not survey grade lines. And the board must find that this will not change the character of the locality. Ken Anderson.
I also
And we're
agree.
on the pole barn here, I'll specify.
Yep, I'll agree.
Larry?
I agree. I think the documentation supports that.
Dana?
Yeah, yes.
Brian?
No.
Ken Visker?
Yes.
Same question on the existing shed. Brian?
No.
Ken Visker?
Yes.
Ken Anderson?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Dana? Yes, same reason.
And in the staff analysis for both of these, I say that you must find that it does not alter the character of the locality. So when you say staff analysis, that's what you're saying, is that it does not, because there's other instances of things like this.
Yes.
And finally, number 6, the variance is not a use variance and shall not have the effect of allowing any use that is not allowed in the zoning district, permit a lower degree of flood protection than the regulatory flood protection elevation, or permit standards lower than those required by state law. The analysis on this is that accessory buildings are permitted use in the ag district, and the proposed use is not located in a floodplain. On the pole barn, Larry?
Yes, it complies with all of the requirements stated in 6.
Dana?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Ken Visker?
Yes.
Ken Anderson?
Yes.
Same question on the existing shed. Ken Anderson?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Ken Visker?
Yes.
Anyone give me a reason why you said yes?
Same as what other, it complies with all the requirements in 6.
Got it. Okay, that completes the findings. It looks as though there's a yes vote carrying each finding.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the findings as stated earlier.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Is there any other discussion? We have a motion and a second to approve the finding as presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. I will entertain a motion to approve or deny the request.
Prior to that, in terms of conditions, I know I'm not recommending any conditions in the staff report, but I am interested in members' thoughts about putting a replacement restriction on the existing shed. You know, the shed, a lot of the reasonings for it being there is that it's not reasonable to have to move it. Perhaps it might not be prudent to extend the variance to future sheds and beyond that, the existing shed that's there.
And that, I mean, I assumed that was the case. It's not? In other words, if we grant a variance to that shed, he can build more
They
sheds?
could build within that footprint, they could put a new, replacement shed.
If that one were torn down, he could put one within that footprint?
Or if it just became,
Right,
dilapidated.
but
or
it has to
something.
stay within that footprint.
Correct, yeah.
So it's kind of like a conditional use that if it's not used that way, it's gone. So you're saying that if the shed burns or falls down or whatever, he can't?
Right, I guess
Can't
what I'm
replace
proposing
it.
is we might want to put if you're thinking about the long-term impacts
Yeah,
of
I agree.
things
That
there.
it might have, any replacement of that shed would require a variance to the same plan.
Sure,
A new
that's
variance.
an excellent suggestion.
Okay.
So I'm just offering that out there if somebody would want to,
Explain it again?
that this variance wouldn't extend to the replacement of the shed.
Okay, and they'd have to get another variance.
We'd have to do a new variance to rebuild on that same location of that shed.
He's up on a hill, if it got, tornado went through 2 weeks from now, he'd be out of luck.
Well, I mean, potentially he'd also have a larger new shed. Perhaps there wouldn't be further need to replace the existing smaller storage shed.
Oh, this is for the smaller shed?
Yes.
Small
Right,
shed,
I'm-
I'm sorry,
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine, yep, that's.
I would
yep,
move that this variance on the small shed apply only to that shed.
Yes.
And that if that shed doesn't exist anymore, any replacement or improvement would require a new variance.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I second that.
That's good.
Is that what you want?
Well,
That sounds
I was just kind of offering that up there, so,
Yeah.
if somebody
To me, that
wants
sounds
to.
like stating
Do we
about as
need-
good as
Are
anyone.
we gonna vote on this as one or two?
Gonna vote on it as two.
Okay.
So this applies to the big shed too?
Now,
No,
This is-
only
this is-
only to that
this
little
is
one,
like-
the existing shed.
Well, what do you mean by two? I'm confused.
We have,
We're voting on two variants.
are we as
We're
well?
conditioning the variance.
By two, there'll be two separate votes. So
Well,
we're gonna
should
first
there-
vote for the
I
pole
got
shed,
it.
and
I
then we'll
got it.
secondly vote for the.
Should there have been two separate votes for the
so we need two separate motions.
findings as well?
Well, there were. Remember we went through them for pole shed, and then we went through them for.
Okay, but when you get down to
When we
line
did the motion on
25,
findings.
have a motion
But
and a
we
second to
ex-
approve
we
the findings as
accept-
presented.
Sure, why don't we just play it safe and go ahead and do that?
Okay, so we did one, was that for which building?
For the pole shed.
Okay, so we need to do another one for the little storage shed.
Sure.
And I'll make the motion to agree on the findings.
For the shed, small shed. Got a second?
1 second.
Oh, we're way ahead of ourselves.
Okay, okay, there's been a motion and seconded to approve the findings as presented for the small shed. All in favor, say aye.
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 All against, same sign.
Aye.
All right. All right, so now we're gonna have two motions as well for, I'll entertain a motion to approve or deny the request for the variance for the large shed.
So move.
I'll second.
I have a motion and seconded to approve the request for the large shed. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
So is that Brian and Ken Visker?
Yes. We have a motion, it's, these are confusing because we
Okay.
we
We
should
have
have
a
done,
we have a
we should have done
condition.
the one and then the other and then the one, but anyhow.
If
We
we
have
have a
motion
mo-
and second.
Make a motion to grant the variance of 45 feet on an existing shed that shall only apply to that shed as long as it exists.
That's a motion.
Yes.
Do we have a second?
I'll
Second.
I have a motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, I'll be in touch with you folks for some zoning permits.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It gets tricky when you have the two going in there at the same time.
It does,
I
yeah.
apologize for that. I thought it would be quicker to do them both at the same time than stack them on top of one another, but certainly more confusing too.
Well, all right, well, we're a little late. We'll do our third variance. Where are we at here? Okay, you're Aaron. You want to read that?
Yep.
And then we're going to read the information for Mr. Lauren Johnson.
Please take notice that an application was received for a variance of setback from Lauren Johnson of Union Township. A hearing on this application will be held at the Houston County Commissioners Room, Caledonia, Minnesota, on Thursday, May 24th, and this was also advertised on May 9th.
Anybody have any questions on that? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to recess the Board of Adjustment meeting and open the public hearing to consider the application.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Have a motion and second to recess the Board of Adjustment meeting and open the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Does any member wish to recuse themselves at this time for a conflict of interest concerning this request? Hearing none, we'll move on. Aaron, will you present the staff report?
The parcel in question here is approximately a 1 acre parcel. It's presumed to be a lot of record, meaning that this parcel existed at the time of zoning. It's surrounded by a half dozen other similar size lots. Much of the presumption of the date of these lots is based on the permits or the date of builds for the houses that surround. It's assumed that a house that's built in 1958 or 1967 is built on a lot that existed at the time, and we don't see any splits occurring of these lots moving forward. Because of the size of these lots and the shape, they're long, narrow lots, this property is unable to do, even the principal building is unable to comply with the zoning rules. However, the building predates zoning, so that is not an issue here, but the building of any additional buildings is problematic. It's nearly impossible without a variance, and given the width of these lots and the layout in the back, it begins to get steeper. The building is, for practical purposes, limited to the front half of this lot and all the neighboring lots. Your staff report contains some averages and numbers. So if you look at the average of these and all the lots that surround it, none of them would meet the requirements of an ag district. These are all in the ag district. And when I say meet the requirements, I mean for just the principal structure, so the house. None of the houses could even meet the setback standards for an ag district. The rear half of the lots is not is challenging for many reasons. Access is one, and that the principal dwellings take up the majority of the area through which you might drive a vehicle to get to the back if you were going to have a shed back there. And then secondly, slopes begin to get steeper, and there's a large bluff on the parcel behind the applicants. There's no water features impacted by this parcel. And I will open up to anything I have not touched on that you'd like to ask of me.
Are there slope restrictions that would affect this?
Yeah, there are, and I'll pass this down. I went out there today to look at the slopes again, and I measured some slopes near the kind of garden area. I know that many of you were on this site and saw there's yard and garden, and I shot some slopes at 22%. And then I have a min topo map here that doesn't have the contour lines, because if I add them, all you see is just a giant blurb of yellow. But you can pick the topography up from the photo, which I'll show down. And I did determine a toe of bluff on there, and that would be to the north of this parcel.
The north. What about the?
Upslope.
Okay, gotcha.
Parcel, yeah.
I gotcha. So, but what is the, what do the ordinances say about slope and building?
Well, in terms of your maximum slope you build on, 23 would be the maximum you would be on. In this case, I understand the intention to be a kind of a concrete wall garage dug into the bottom of that slope, kind of like a walkout ranch, but not a house, a garage.
And there is no problem with digging into the bluff to, like basically the whole building or nearly the whole building will have to be set back into the bluff. And is that in no way problematic according to the ordinance?
Well, if we're above the toe of the bluff, then it's problematic. If we're not above the toe of the bluff, then we're not technically in a bluff. Given the slopes here, though, I think that should the variance be granted and we move to zoning permit applications, we would require an erosion control plan. That's not something that's done on all sheds, it's done on all houses, but when the property or the situation requires it, we would ask. And I think in this case, due to those slopes, we'd want to be sure that we have adequate to control the water.
I'm going to betray my ignorance here a little bit, but what defines a toe of a bluff versus a bluff?
The toe of the bluff would be the visual change in slope.
Okay,
So if you have something very steep and then it becomes less steep,
that's the toe.
the whole hill is not the toe. And in this case, we're looking for, there we have slopes that are very steep, about 40% slopes further to the north. And then we come down on gentler slopes that are gradually becoming more and more gentle, and they're about 20 or 22% above his house. So he'd be digging into something of about, well, there's already some excavation that's occurred there when it was initially built. So there's a steep bank that comes right at the back of the driveway. That's at about a 30%, but I don't determine that to be the original grade. I think that 22% is probably what we were dealing with there.
What is the setback, side yard setback in a residential district?
15 feet.
But this ag.
Right. Zoned ag, but it's essentially
It's essentially
residential
residential.
Yep.
district.
Anything more for questions for Aaron? Excuse me, does the applicant have any comments or anything to add?
I'm not sure what to touch on. You guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Still, for the recording, you want to get into the mic.
Nope.
It's on.
It's on.
Just
Yeah,
push
but
toward-
get it closer
push it
to
towards
you.
you.
Okay, red light means on? Okay.
Move it over. We don't need it, but the recording does.
Okay. I really don't know what I would add. I mean, I'm kind of out of my element here. If you guys need could guide me to discuss certain things, that would be beneficial. For the area I actually have to work with, this garage, that's why I'm going through this, to get this variance, to put up a building that would be adequate for, I'm just trying to best use the available space for my benefit. Like I say, I'm not really sure how to even address, I don't do this type of thing very often, gentlemen.
Is your intention to connect this to the house?
Excuse me?
Is your intention to connect the building to the house?
No, I don't think the roof lines would allow that. And my intent, which can be changed, I haven't even, like I say, I tried talking to a contractor, but because of the dispute on how much room I have to build, they won't even really even start an estimate for me until I get this variance deal hashed out. But my intent is to start even with the north wall of the house. I might have an overhang or a carport type scenario that might come south of the back of the house, but that's if I have money left over to do that. My goal or my intent is to start at the inline of the house and build backwards into the hill.
Is this then pitch roof, flat roof, one story, I'm assuming?
Well, no, it'll be a pitch roof. It will not be a flat roof.
Okay.
So, and the pitch will end up, going, the peak will be running north and south, so the pitch will be running east and west.
Yeah, have to be. What's that good? Oh, and it'd be one story. You can't be higher than the house.
Yeah, I don't think I could afford to go that tall.
Just,
And I don't even know how tall my house is. Yeah, I would like to go as tall as I can, and if there are restrictions, then I'll abide by those restrictions. But I'm not aware of.
is there a restriction on the size of the door?
Well, all those restrictions are in residential districts.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
we're in an ag
There you
district
go.
here. Now, it may be prudent to,
Put a condition.
add or utilize the residential district restrictions because, as was stated earlier, for all intents and purposes, this is somewhat of a residential neighborhood.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
reality, just not in zoning. And there are restrictions on the maximum height of a door. I think it's to prevent a semi from fitting in there. And there are restrictions that your shed is set back further than your house. And then there is a maximum square footage, I believe, of 1,500 square feet. Is that? There is a maximum square footage, but it's large.
What's the door deal? Can you, that kind of confuses me. The garage doors?
Yeah.
There's a
There's a height restriction
height restriction
for the garage doors,
For what reason? I guess.
so people aren't parking semis in them, in a residential district.
Well, I have no idea what I'm gonna end up with, but I would like probably a door that maybe a motorhome would fit in. I don't know.
As the residential shed restrictions go, I think the door height is probably the least critical, because this is ag. If you wanted to, you could simply speak to the size
I
requirement.
don't know if you guys remember my driveway. You aren't gonna get a semi in there.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah, I think that's more of a, recommendation.
I mean, it is an ag district now. That's why we're asking for a 45-foot variance
Yep.
and not a 10-foot variance.
So then you get all the other benefits of the ag district as well. And they don't have the door restriction.
Aaron, do we know where the property line actually is on this property? When I was out there talking to Lauren, he did not seem very sure where it was. And then this handout you gave doesn't make that entirely clear unless
it
I'm
doesn't.
reading quite right.
It does raise some questions, doesn't it?
No, I mean, the short answer to that is no, we don't. You know, what this is saying is, what the surveyor is saying is that he believes that the location of those lines are, as they show on, say, Beacon or
On our map here.
are fairly accurate in his view. But again, he's not surveying it, so this is not the way you would.
So you could easily be off by 10 or 15 feet. Is that fair or not?
No.
I would guess less than that, but, you know,
Didn't he say
3 or 4
1.6?
feet maybe, easily. Well, there was a reference to the description of the permanent corner and is different than what they have in
Well, it says
this
it-
reference, so.
He says it, but only 1.8 feet east, so it's less than 2 feet if it was, but again, then he
Yeah.
says it's accurate, so.
But that's not having surveyed it. He was,
Right,
you know, so he's
right.
just saying based on his.
And then the accuracy of the original survey is not always being verified of these properties by this letter.
But as I read this, the most it would be off east and west. I mean, that north-south line would be 1.8 feet east. Does that make sense? That's the way I read it. So roughly, he could be 2 feet.
Correct.
Yeah, a couple
2 feet
feet.
off.
I don't think it'd be much more than that, you know.
That's
Based on
that's
that.
what it
What
sounds
is,
to
how
me.
much value is a agreement signed by both parties that they agree that this is where it is? In talking to, I forget his name, Mr. Johnson today, apparently the neighbor on the adjoining property line agrees with the trees and where they're there. Would it be reasonable to put some stakes in and say, this is where it is for all intents and purposes? We both agree this is where it is, and going forward, that becomes part of the title for both the properties, and
Look, I can't tell you what should be reasonable or not. That's that's what you're doing. I don't believe it would become part of the title.
Well, can I jump in? I mean, my intent, and they're being terrific with me, is to work out, have a legal document written up to specify exactly what we agree on, and have an attorney write it up and have all the descriptions. So before I put a shovel in the ground, you know, I want something in writing to clarify property lines, and then hopefully I get my variance and then I stay 5 feet off of what is agreed upon. I mean, they've been more than willing to just, no, go ahead, do whatever, you know, we don't care, but I insist that it's gotta be legal, it's gotta be sound and definite, so that future parties are not in any kind of harm's way or financial or dispute scenario.
you know,
So,
the neighbor changes resident, another resident comes in there and doesn't like you, and if they discover you got an extra
Not
2
like
feet
me.
of the, well, I know that's
No,
probably
okay.
real
Exactly.
hypothetical.
That's the stance that I'm taking, is
Yeah.
that it has to be locked down legally,
Yeah.
so there's no dispute in the future. It's
Get those-
ironclad
Get
is my
those
goal.
dimensions recorded at the recorder's office then.
Yep.
So it's
Yeah, that's what I
legally
meant, put
recorded.
it, meant part of their deed,
Yeah.
not their title, but.
Well, and I'm actually, I know I was down with Eric, and we went through some things, so, I mean, he could actually punch up some stuff on the screen, and then we could locate where I wanna be, and I could actually then have footage dimensions to put in the documents. So, I mean, I'll do whatever it needs to be done to get this done legally the right way.
So, but is it reasonable? Because when I was looking at it today, I don't know, I always kind of go where the telephone poles are put too, and they're in line with that big line of huge trees there. So for, you know, until proven otherwise, that's your line, but you have to verify that with your neighbors, make that part of the condition of the permit.
So I have to ask, are you, your opinion of the power poles or the beacon lines? What are we doing? I don't know, I'm confused.
No, I don't know.
what we're doing.
I don't think we want to discuss that at this point.
No, you have to come to an agreement with your
Right.
neighbors,
No,
and that's what you will,
Exactly, and that's what I have intended.
yeah.
I intend to do that, yes.
Well, it seems to me, we can't rely on agreements with neighbors. We have to rely on a survey or the beacon line. And worst possible case is he loses 1.8 feet and he has to, you know, if we granted the variance and it was 1.8 feet over, he'd have to move his garage in, or it wouldn't be as wide as he maybe hoped. Does that make sense?
If I believe I'm gonna gain the 1.8 feet going to the west.
Going east.
That was my,
This says it's going east,
okay.
so you'd lose it.
Eric gave me the indication that that line was going to the west.
The corner moves mostly north, but about 1.8 feet east.
Okay, but
Doesn't
that's,
I think we need a, you need a survey.
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here. I think we should get his testimony and anybody else who wants to testify, and then we should debate these issues as a board.
I agree.
yeah.
All right. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Not off the top of my head. There probably
We'll
is.
come back to you.
Yep, okay.
All right. Is anybody else interested in commenting? Have any comments before or against this process?
Is it on?
No, it is.
Yeah. It's on.
Yeah, it's on.
Oh,
Little button right here.
Bruce Chemical from Caledonia. The only thing that really works is a survey. Power poles, fences, chicken coops, garages don't mean anything. I watched last year 2 neighbors fight over a triangular piece of property that cost them over $20,000 in legal fees. So, driving stakes works for gardens, but not for property lines.
Thank you. Anybody else interested in commenting? Hearing none, we'll move on. Now, do you have anything to comment?
No, I guess, I'm not sure what how I would respond to that.
All right, hearing nothing, we'll move on. I'll entertain a motion to conclude the public hearing and reconvene the Board of Adjustment meeting.
I'll second it.
Ken? We have a motion and a second to close the public meeting, reconvene the Board of Adjustment meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. For the record, have any members visited this site?
Yes.
No.
I don't know if I'm supposed to keep track of that or not. If there are no further discussion, we'll go through the findings.
Finding number 1, the variance request is in harmony with the intent and purpose of official controls. Staff analysis regarding this is that the residential development goals of the county include providing safe, healthful, blight-free residences. To achieve this goal, it is suggested that rehabilitation of existing older homes should be encouraged. Investment in an accessory building has the effect of adding value to the property, and thus may encourage the upkeep of the existing primary home. Ken Anderson.
Yes.
Larry.
Yes, and I agree with the staff analysis.
Dana.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Ken Visker.
Yes.
Finding number 2. There are practical difficulties in complying with the official controls, and the proposed use of the property is reasonable. Economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. Dana.
Yes.
Brian. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't give you I'm getting ahead of myself. Hold your thought for one moment, Brian. The analysis on this one is the consideration of the parcel width is warranted, as the long, narrow shape presents setback challenges that may constitute a practical difficulty. Views from the house and how the building placement might affect them might also be considered. All right, I'm sorry, Brian, go ahead.
I think that I will vote yes on that. And there's 7 houses here on 7 acres. And I think all of them are out of compliance right now. So I think we definitely have a problem here. And I will propose a solution later.
Ken Visker.
Yeah. Yes.
Ken Anderson.
Yes.
Larry.
Yes, I think he's doing what he can to improve his property, and there's, well, I guess we'll get into it later, there is no other way to do it.
Number 3, the variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property and not created by the property owner. And the analysis here is that the special condition would be the property area and width is atypical within the ag district. Brian.
Yes.
Ken Visker.
Yes.
Ken Anderson.
Yes, I agree with the staff analysis.
Larry.
Yes.
And Dana.
Yes.
Number 4, the variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than a variance, and the minimum variance which would alleviate the practical difficulty is sought. And the analysis on this is that alternative placement is limited to the rear of the existing house, which would require a curved driveway and obstruct views of the bluff. The board must determine if these or other factors are reasonable reasons to grant the variance. Larry.
Yes.
Dana.
Yes.
Brian.
No, I think it's unclear that this is the minimum variance that's required to correct the problem. Because the building could be of varying widths, and we don't even know where the property line is, so we can't say that this is the minimum variance that would resolve the problem.
Ken Visker.
This is sort of like the last one in the sense that you're asking for the absolute maximum, and I have a similar kind of a thing. 15-foot variance or setbacks are required in residential districts. This is like a residential district. I'm not comfortable with a 5-foot setback. I would be comfortable with something more, because then it would be more in compliance with our zoning laws. So I guess the problem is if it's 5 feet, I have to say no. If it were less than that, I would be more inclined to approve it. Or more than, let's put it that, more than that. If it were 15, I would be in favor, but we can't do that, so it's a no.
Ken Anderson.
I'll vote yes, but my initial thought when I first saw the application was no way. But then after site analysis, being on the site, I realized there's no other alternative.
And Larry, did I start with you on that?
No.
Then Larry.
Yes.
Okay. Dana, I started with you on that.
Yeah, I've
Okay.
already voted on that.
Number 5.
Do I can I jump in or which not?
Well, I don't think you need to jump in
Okay, all right.
at this point.
Just had a point, wanted to throw up.
The variance will not alter the essential character of the locality nor substantially impair property values or the public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity. The analysis here is that none of the nearby structures meet the required setbacks for an ag district. The request would permit building closer to the line than is currently observed, but would not be a drastic departure from the status quo. The neighbors most likely to be affected by the project have indicated their support and stated that the project may aid drainage. Ken Anderson.
I'll say yes.
Larry?
Yes, I do agree with the staff analysis.
Dana?
Yes, I agree with staff analysis also.
Brian?
Yes.
Ken Visker?
Yes.
Sixth and finally, the request is not a use variance and shall not have the effect of allowing any use that is not allowed in the zoning district. Permit a lower degree of flood protection than the regulatory flood protection elevation, or permit standards lower than those required by state law. The accessory buildings are a permitted use in an ag district, and there are no mapped floodplains on this parcel. Larry?
Yes, it complies with all the points hit in the paragraph.
Dana?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Ken Visker?
Yes.
And Ken Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, so should you, that completes the findings. I believe we have a affirmative vote on each finding. Staff is recommending a condition should you vote to grant the variance, and that is that prior to the issuance of a zoning permit, a survey of the property by a land surveyor licensed by the state of Minnesota must be completed and submitted to the county. And this is, I guess, based on my discussion with Eric. I have talked with Lauren as well. What he's proposing is better than nothing, but a survey is much better. I'll leave it there.
I would like to make this suggestion. I know this is zoned agriculture, but if we're honest with ourselves, it is in fact residential. And since none of the buildings in this whole development are in compliance, and furthermore, nothing can be built on any of them and be legal. So I would suggest that we put a 15-foot setback on it, which would be the setback of a residential area, and say that all other residential restrictions should apply to it, and that the boundary has to be surveyed so we resolve that whole issue of what is the setback exactly, because you cannot have a setback without a known boundary line, and we don't have a known boundary line. So I think those three things are appropriate in this case: a survey, residential restrictions, and a residential setback of 15 feet.
What this is proposing, I guess, would be granting a variance subject to that survey. So you're granting whatever you're going to grant, and then before the permit for wherever he's going to construct is issued, the survey is completed, and we measure off that. And that's a little different, I think, than what you're proposing.
How is it different? I didn't follow you quite.
Well, that you can grant the variance. You're suggesting, I guess it would be a grant of a variance, but you're taking it to the standard in a residential district.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Never mind, it is very similar.
Is it our prerogative to change the request?
You have the ability to do that if your findings bear out that what he's requesting is unreasonable, but what you're willing to grant is reasonable.
you're putting this last condition in there. We need to discuss that though, right? I don't know.
I don't think anyone's, is that a motion, or are you just throwing it out there for discussion?
No, I am throwing it out for discussion, but I would like to make a motion on that, assuming that we don't get some serious objection here.
I support the first two. The zoning, I mean, the residential restrictions, without seeing them, I'd be reluctant to approve, because there may be some residential restrictions that would be prohibitive, and I don't know what they are. I think the 15-foot setback is a good idea, and obviously the survey, but without knowing what all the residential restrictions are, I'm reluctant to place that burden on him.
I would just say that this is, in fact, kind of a residential development, so it seems like it would be appropriate.
Except it's zoned ag, and we may be overstepping.
I think we could put that restriction on there, couldn't we, Aaron, or
You
not?
certainly could.
Well, but I think if this was zoned residential, he'd be in here looking for a variance from the 15 feet.
If we just use the beacon lines, there's only 30 feet between the line and the house. So I haven't seen building plans there, but I think that his plans would have to, what you're proposing wouldn't accommodate his plans as I understand them to be, although I don't know the detail, but I think they would be, 15 feet wouldn't be enough to construct the building that he's looking at.
I think at this stage, we have to assume the boundaries that Beacon has, until proven otherwise, are correct. And for that variance, for him to do it, he has to have this variance.
Well, let me just pack. When you get a survey, we're saying he has to get a survey. What does that include? It doesn't have to have his. I'm envisioning he has to have that boundary surveyed and defined, and then it's, till that happens, we can't really. Whatever we do, we don't know where it's going to be. Put it that way. But all he has to survey is that one boundary. I don't know if he can do that.
Would it change things drastically if it were 3 or 4 feet one way or the other in terms of what you'd be willing to grant?
Well, I don't know. From what I looked at, when I saw today, he's got a blacktop coming up there, and that's, I want to say, 5 feet from them trees or from what looks to be the boundary, and that's a logical place for that garage to go back. If he goes 15 feet, I mean, he doesn't have a lot of room there, and to have a 2-vehicle garage, he's going to have all of that, I think.
Wait a minute, I think we're making an incorrect assumption here. Are we trying to get him what he's asking, or are we trying to do something that makes sense based on the ordinance's restrictions? Those are two different things. And I would like to accommodate anybody and everybody, but we don't, because there's rules that restrict certain accommodations. So we don't start at this from the standpoint of how do we get him what he wants. We start from this perspective of what fits in the ordinance and what is a reasonable variance from that ordinance if one is in fact reasonable.
How do you determine what's reasonable?
Well, for example, a residential setback is 15 feet, so that seems like a reasonable place to start, given that it is in fact a residential area.
I think we're the ones that determine reasonable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
It's not a hard and fast rule.
I don't know, if you saw that there today, you make him do a 15-foot setback, he's gonna have a 1.5-car garage, he's gonna have 15 feet of useless property over here. For him to be over there, there are trees there, it's not gonna disadvantage anybody to have that go to the side of where his blacktop is there. We're just saying, well, the ordinance is 15 feet. I don't care if it makes sense or not. We're going to make it 15 feet, and he's got a 1.5-car garage.
No, wait a minute.
That's not what we should be doing.
We say it's not going to disadvantage anybody, but he also just said, just a second, he just said that this might be built tall enough to accommodate an RV. So that would significantly restrict the neighbor's view.
Well, then we can deal with that.
And so that is a disadvantage, and furthermore, somebody else is going to own that neighbor's property somewhere in the future.
I think you both have pretty good valid points here. I'm sure you could do this all night, but perhaps
Yeah.
if we move to a motion, we would be able to continue on. It would either motion pass or motion would fail.
I'll make a motion that we approve a variance based on a completed survey, and that the variance be 15 feet from the surveyed property line, and that residential restrictions apply based on the fact that this is in fact basically a residential area, even though it is not zoned as such. You have 7 houses in 7 acres.
All right. So Larry, you're going to call for...
Is there a second to that? Is there a second for that? Is there a second for that motion? Hearing none, the motion fails. Do we have any other discussion?
I guess I would like to change my recommendation here to simply that line. If we're going to require a survey, I don't see how we can require him to survey the north or if he
Yeah,
doesn't
well,
want to,
if-
we just need that one line, because
Yeah.
that's what we're dealing with now, so that,
The west, north, south line.
That's what I actually meant.
yes, yep, no, I'm keying off you there for that.
And that will have a significant bearing on what he's allowed to do. I don't know how you build that into it.
Trying make the motion to grant the variance with the condition of a surveyed property line between the west neighbor.
I think we need to adopt the findings first. We have to go
Oh, I'm
back.
sorry.
Thank you. We like to get ahead of ourselves.
Motion to adopt the findings.
Okay, well, before the finding was the conditions. In the sequence we have here anyhow. Shall we do the findings, come back to the conditions? Is that the deal here?
No, let's do it in the order.
I think what you've got is the recommended to make the conditions, then we adopt the findings, and then when we do the vote, if there are conditions, we include those in
In
the
the
vote
final
for
motion.
approval.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
So we are at the board's conditions yet.
Yeah.
Number 21.
And the only condition is the
So
survey.
we need a motion basically to accept the findings, the vote of the findings that we did.
But we have to satisfy the conditions first.
No, we'll do the
We-
conditions when we
Put
do
it
the
on.
vote for approval or denial.
Okay, well, we're taking them out of sequence then.
Well, what I mean by recommended conditions there is just anything that the staff's gonna recommend you add, should you decide to grant the variance.
Okay,
And I'm saying if you're granting here, it's the survey that we would be suggesting you put on.
so that's one of the conditions, the survey.
Well, it's not on there yet, but that's my recommendation.
And we should do that after the findings?
That, yeah.
Yep. After you approve the findings,
All
then
right.
someone might make a motion.
I'll entertain a motion to adopt the findings as stated. This is just the adoption of them, not the final.
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the findings as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So, I will entertain a motion to approve or deny the request. We can put the conditions on now, is that the
Yep.
deal?
Yes.
I'll make the motion to approve the requested variance with the condition that a survey line be established on the west, I believe it's the west property line.
Yes, it is the west property line in question.
Could I suggest that we make that survey line be established before I grant him any sort of zoning?
Yes, yeah, that's the intent.
You mean building permit or zoning?
Well,
Same thing?
Same
thing.
thing.
Okay,
Same
gotcha.
thing.
Okay.
Okay, what, did we have a second on that?
I'll second.
Have a motion, have a motion and a second to approve the request with the stated condition. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carried. The request has been approved with the condition as stated.
So, got a point or two to just chat a little bit, or what? Just wanted to make a point that, you know, if I can, I need access to my backyard also. That's kind of why I want to crowd that west line as much as I can, so I have decent access to my backyard between my structure and my house. So that is why I'm pushing for the building 5 feet off of the property line, so I can best use.
I'd suggest we just move on.
Huh?
I would suggest we just move on. We don't want to get into the
Yeah.
discussion. Yeah,
You got
Okay.
it.
yes, you got it. Okay, next hearing, we don't have any. Is there any other business, any old business? Hearing none, other business, is there any other business to discuss? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion, and second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.